In there to the very last speaker of the day. Some of you might wonder, what's the connection between reefs and growth management? Well, over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll try to make that connection for you. I'm going to start off with giving credit to this group that not too many people know about, SFCRE, the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative. It is a mouthful, but I have learned to say it because I have actually been the Martin County Conservation Alliance's representative on this group for about the last year. It's a several-year-long process that we're about in the middle of, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to provide information about the program to all of you and then to make that linkage between growth management and reefs. I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about our local reefs and why they're important to us, threats to them, talk about the problems that we have with reefs throughout South Florida, and the responses to those threats, because indeed there are actions that are being taken as we speak. And finally, I'm going to end up with how you can help. And some of you may have the brochures that I put around the chairs. Those are some examples of ways that each one of us can help protect the reefs in the area. So what is a coral reef? You know, we hear a lot about them. Some of you may be scuba divers or have snorkelers and have been out there and seen some of the reefs. They're colonies of these little tiny organisms called cnidarians. They are animals, they're not plants, although some of them look like plants. What creates the reef is those little organisms secrete limestone. So right out here off Bathtub Beach is part of the coral reef and hard bottom reefs of the northerly extent of reefs in Florida. They create these large structures because they grow very slowly, year after year, decade after decade. And so some of the coral colonies that we have along the southeast coast are indeed decades or even hundreds of years old. One of the key features about reefs, though, and corals is that the corals survive based on kind of an interesting interrelationship between the animal itself and algae that grow in it. So you think you have to have some algae to make a coral thrive, make it healthy, but it's quite an interesting balance, because if you get too much of that algae, which responds to the high levels of nutrients in our waters, that ends up killing the corals. So let's talk a little bit about where the reefs are in Florida. Certainly everybody knows about them down in the Keys. The Keys are very well known for it. There's been a long-standing initiative by Monroe County, the state government, and the feds to protect the reefs in the Keys. But up here in our area, from northern Miami-Dade County through our area, there's been very little interest in the reefs up until just this past couple years. In 2003, this group, the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative, got together and started to put together that there are a lot of programs in place to protect the reefs in the Keys, but there's very little being done up our way. So let's just talk about the reefs a little bit. They are a series of short parallel tracks that start up close to shore. And depending on how wide they are and the distance between them really varies as you start from down the south end by Miami-Dade County and work your way up to us. By the time you get up to Martin County, it's just really, for the most part, a single reef, and it's a ways offshore. So the reefs are very definitely extensive. Often what pollutes one part of the reef continues to pollute further north. Many of them are indeed very close to shore. Up here off Bathtub, you know, it makes a connection from the reef right to the shore. So indeed, that's part of the problem that Florida Oceanographic and the county has. People just walk out on that hard bottom reef. So the challenge is to allow them to coexist in intensively urbanized areas. They're a hotbed of plant and animal diversity. Over 6,000 different organisms are found in the reef system here along Southeast Florida. 43 different species of corals that are known. There's probably more than that. Those are hard corals. 37 species of soft corals. That's often what you see in the underwater movies of the reefs, where the corals are waving in the wind or in the current, the sea fans and things like that. 70 species of sponges, over 500 species of fish, and over 600 different kinds of crustaceans. You know, lobsters get the most amount of interest and notoriety, but a whole variety of different organisms. So let's talk a little bit about how reefs are important to us. Certainly they're a source of income. Got some information over there on the left, and some of that is a little bit dated. I've seen different numbers, but at least $55 billion annually of income related to the coral reefs, whether it's commercial fishing or charter fishing, dive shops, seafood restaurants, whatever it might be. They're also important to us for coastal protection. And you can pretty much see here how the reefs are growing up, and so when we get periods of high storms, those waves break on the reefs, and it kind of protects our shoreline. And whether it's in a hurricane or just a strong northeaster, you can see from that sort of a picture how the waves are breaking out there on the reef, and so it's protecting our shorelines. Also certainly valuable for food and medicine. There are a number of chemicals that are being synthesized through the folks up at the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. But they are threatened, and there's a variety of reasons and things that are contributing to that demise. Thank you, Jackie, for letting me use one of your pictures here that shows that inky water from the discharges from Lake Okeechobee as they go out through the St. Lucie Inlet. Well, we've got that reef right offshore. The St. Lucie Inlet State Park is the northerly extent of the reefs. So when this ink goes out the inlet, it goes right out over our nearshore reefs. Yes, there are still discharges like this in place. Certainly not here in Martin County, thanks to the advocacy of all of us and those folks who came before us, but this is a discharge still in operation down in Broward County. That's the pollution that's coming out from the urbanization of the millions of residents in South Florida. There are indeed problems of kind of acute damage to the reefs, whether it's a scuba diver who's not quite sure what he's doing that stomps down on a coral that may have taken decades to grow. There are groundings, certainly not intentional, but occasionally there are problems like this along our coast as well. And yes, the reefs aren't immune to problems with endangered, invasive species. This is one of the lionfish. Many of you may have heard about how they're taking over in our coastal areas, not just on the reefs, but they've now been found in the Indian River Lagoon as well. But probably as I try to make this connection between growth management and the protection of our reefs, here's a picture of a nice sunny day out there at Jensen Beach. Well, compare that to the same kind of picture in Broward and Dade County. That's what happens when you don't have the strong growth management that we have here in Martin County. As the population goes up of people, so goes the stress on the whole environment, including the corals that are near shore. Not to say that this can't be turned around. Down in the Keys, as they have developed the Keys, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, they put in a lot of protections on the reefs. And so I've got a series of slides here from Careysport Reef. It's off of Key Largo. You see back in the 1970s, it was a pretty healthy reef system. The coral that you see here is elkhorn coral. Elkhorn and staghorn have recently been added to the endangered species list in the United States because they have had so many problems over the last few years. So you're starting to see it decline here as the water quality in the Florida Keys got worse. Continues to almost a dead reef in the late 1990s. The Keys National Marine Sanctuary got passed and they started tightening the restrictions. Did that cost people money? And Macon and Monroe County spend all kinds of money in trying to clean up the water? Yes, indeed, it caused problems. But over the years, we have started to see some recruitment coming back, such that now in 2009 and since then, we've got good elkhorn and staghorn corals coming back. So it can be done. What we're trying to do is prevent that sort of a full cycle here. We're not into the point where our corals offshore of Martin County are in that terrible state. So there's this group, the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative, that was put together, started back in 2003. The idea was to get together a variety of the entities who are stakeholders in this one way or another. And what they identified as priority threats at that time that they wanted to address were problems associated with fishing and diving and other uses on the reef, land-based pollution, no matter what it was, not only that sort of a discharge from a pipe, but also just the runoff from our urban areas. The boat groundings was also a problem, but coastal construction itself is a problem. You know, we all have sort of many of us have mixed emotions about beach nourishment projects. Yes, we want the sand on the beach so the sea turtles will come in and continue to nest. Do we want to actually see those little sand fleas and all the little organisms that live on the beach get piled on by 6 feet worth of sand? There's 100% mortality of all those organisms that get piled on by all the sand. It's no wonder after a beach nourishment project that you don't see the little shorebirds. There's nothing for them to eat. So it takes time for them to migrate down the coast. So anyhow, coastal construction projects are one of those features, one of those threats that this group was assigned to take a look at. The last of these top 4 was lack of awareness. And so indeed, part of their interest in getting the NGOs in here was to give us a platform, give us these sort of materials to go out and try to teach the community about the different things that are going on. So I mentioned this is a several-year process. We are right now sort of in between steps 2 and steps 3. Our group, and there is for this North Community Group, working group, they set it up to be a South County working group that consists of people from Miami-Dade and Broward County in the South group, and then the North group is Palm Beach and Martin County. And you see some of the groups that are in here. I did use the acronyms in here a lot, but Florida Oceanographic on the environmental side here, Florida Oceanographic, the Nature Conservancy, Surfrider, and here we are at the Martin County Conservation Alliance. But it's a variety of stakeholders as well. The governmental entities, Martin County is certainly playing a role in that. Their county engineer, Kathy Fitzpatrick, is on that. Her counterpart with Palm Beach County as well. So we've gone through this process of trying to identify these management actions, ways that we can take some sort of proactive steps to prevent the continued deterioration of the reefs here offshore of our area. And I say we're between these 2 steps right now because our group for the North County, we came up with about 250 active steps that could be done. Those recommendations then went to this higher up body, the SEFCRE, kind of the management committee. They have been digesting what we put together, and we're just about to get to the point where later this month we reconvene, and they're going to provide us their comments on how they thought our recommendations either were workable or not. All these meetings are open to the general public. They're held normally once a month. We've been on hiatus for the last couple months as the SEFCRE groups have been looking at our recommendations. But the next meeting is going to be right next door over here at IRSC in the Chastain Center. They're open to the public. Anybody can come anytime you want. They always set aside a certain portion for public comment so you can get in and not only watch what's going on but provide input as well. I put some information out on the sheets there, both a brochure about what you can do as a homeowner as far as reducing pesticides and herbicides and chemicals on our lawns, but also a little card about this. The folks who are running this program have established a database where any one of us can put information in on the computer. The website is up here. It's also on those cards. The idea is to put the information in, and the SEFCRE group then analyzes all that, and they put it in sort of a master database that helps them to identify that economic value, where people are going and why, that sort of information. How you can help, certainly fill out one of those cards, but there are other things as well. One of the programs that we have learned from the Keys is how valuable it is for the installation of those mooring buoys. There's only a couple of them offshore here at St. Lucie Inlet State Park, but the idea is that has shown to be very successful, so we'll probably replicate that further. if you go out there and you're going diving or snorkeling or whatever, use one of those reef balls rather than just tossing an anchor over shore, over the coral reef. If you're out there snorkeling or diving, don't touch the coral. You want to stay a safe distance up above it and protect it from any sort of blunt trauma. And if you see any kinds of problems, they have set up a 1-800 number, 866, a toll-free number here, to report any of these various things that you see, whether it's vessel groundings or marine debris. You read about the ghost nets that get caught up on the reef. Anything like that that you see that isn't right, you can call in and get that information onto the record. So with that, there is a website also set up where you can get in and look at all of this information, the copies of the handouts that are in the packet, as well as a bunch of other information is on the ourreefs.com website. So with that, we'll get the lights back on, and I'll try to answer any questions that people might have. That's back in the back.
What do you think the health of our Martin County and Cummings County reefs are?
The question was, what is my opinion of how the quality of the reefs off of Martin County? And I'd say they're fair. They're fair. Just like the diversity of other life in the Indian River Lagoon and other areas, we're at the very far northern end of the natural range of reefs. So for water temperature primarily, that's what's sort of restricting where they can live. So anytime you're at the very edge of the natural range of any organism, it's going to not be at its best. So we're never going to have great big huge reefs of elkhorn or staghorn off of Martin County. So that being said, the downside of that situation here is very definitely the nutrients that get sucked out through the St. Lucie Inlet and go down through the littoral drift down the shoreline. A lot of that nutrients causes algae blooms, and that does a couple of different things. It reduces the amount of sunlight that gets down to the reef, so that's bad. And also it causes more algae to grow. So I mentioned that the algae there in the coral is a symbiotic relationship. Well, as we get too much algae, the reefs get more algae and less coral. So from that perspective, if you go to different areas along the reef, you would say that there's sort of a different condition. Right outside the inlet, it's not all that good. If you go further down off of Jupiter Island, there are some areas where it's in pretty good shape. Back in the back.
Well, it looks like at least there's a little light at the end of the tunnel, possibly deal with the discharge problem. This is kind of a two-part question. Do you think, which do you think is more harmful, the discharge from the lake with the nutrient problem, or the beach renourishment? And do you think there's ever a possibility of dealing with beach renourishment problem?
They're complementary problems that unfortunately happen at different times, so that the reef continues to get impacted, and it will, I'm afraid, for the foreseeable future. Yes, there are steps being taken to address the discharges from Lake Okeechobee. What Mark didn't mention is, yes, we're glad that SEP just got funded. It's going to take, or the funding is in the works, it's going to take, what, 13% of the discharge, and that would otherwise come out the inlet, and it's not going to be effective until, is it 2026, Sarah, something?
And also IRL has to be completed in order for the problem to work.
So in the long term, it's going to take many years for those projects to be successful. The county, I think, has done an excellent job in trying to deal with the management of stormwater on our urban lands, so not related to Lake Okeechobee, but everything else. So we're going to keep making incremental progress, so I'd say that's good. On the downside, I would say beach management is, beach nourishment projects, they're a necessary evil. They'll probably continue forever, and there will continue to be impacts associated with those. As we get more scientific information about the detrimental effects of those, hopefully the construction industry overall will get better techniques about how to prevent that material from getting deposited on the reefs. So I think in the long term, the problems associated with that will probably be less and less in future years. Probably the biggest thing that we have working for us is just offshore the natural northerly flowing Gulf Stream. You know, it's so close right up here at Jupiter Inlet that no matter how much nasty stuff Broward County and everybody else puts in the water and comes out St. Lucie Inlet, it's going to get diluted by all that water coming north. So from that perspective, the seed source for the corals and the fish and everything else, they're out in the Gulf of Mexico and down in the Keys, and they're going to continue to come up. So from that perspective, I think the reefs are pretty resilient, and if we learn from past mistakes, hopefully we'll be able to prevent them from being permanently damaged. Yes, sir.
I just watched an interesting program on PBS, and we're looking at global warming and the rise of the seas. And now they're predicting that Antarctica, the western portion of Antarctica, ice is melting so rapidly. They're anticipating a meter of water increase on the globe within a relatively short period of time. What's that going to do to our reefs? I mean, are we worried about something which we were already destroying, is my point.
I think that we are not, because those reefs, when the conditions are right, will continue to grow. We don't know the extent to which they're growing out here, but recently through the Inlet Management Plan for St. Lucie Inlet and the funding for that, the county is starting a study to determine how much the worm rock reef off of Sailfish Point area is growing on an annual basis. And so in the big picture, there has been a change in sea level going on for millions of years. And the reefs, for the most part, are adapting to that. You know, the sand pine ridge here along Atlantic Ridge and everything, that's the old beach dune. Well, so indeed are some of the limestone sediments here underlying Martin County. So I think in the big picture, the reefs, if we can deal with the water quality problem, they will continue to grow and continue, hopefully, to protect the shoreline from more erosion.
The key thing that I probably should have emphasized is that the rapidity at which the glaciers are melting is something we've never anticipated before. And so you're referring to a growth pattern which takes hundreds of years, whereas the water change, the depth of water is predicted now within a couple of decades.
Right, you're absolutely right. I don't want to diminish the potential for that. I think in reality, the urban situation in coastal Florida has even that much more to lose if we don't turn around the whole situation of global climate change and sea level rise. As soon as the millions of people in Miami-Dade and Broward and so on get increasingly affected by sea level rise, hopefully humanity overall will be taking steps to prevent it from continuing to that sort of a, extent that you were describing. Maybe so. Yes.
Yeah, this is a related global warming or climate change question. And what is the impact that the acidification of the oceans has on coral reefs?
It's a good question, and those are the kinds of things that we have all been learning about at these Coral Reef Initiative meetings. That they haven't gotten into a detailed description of that, but we have heard that theories anyhow, that part of the problems in the Indian River Lagoon have been related to increased acidity in the impoundments that ring around the edge of the lagoon. I guess I'm not up on it well enough to know. I think we're still dealing with blunt force trauma kinds of problems. And not that some of the scientists aren't looking at that sort of big term picture, but I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that one. So, sorry, Deborah.
Putting that carbon into the atmosphere, you know, that's the solution. solution for
Yeah. Nope, Keith.
I know there aren't many possible pluses of global warming, but is there a likelihood, because of the increased temperature, that the northern extension of the reef will continue moving north, and that at least there'll be a migration of the reef to cover more of the east coast of Florida?
Right, hopefully those in the back heard this, and it's an excellent supposition, and I think it's probably accurate. It is a potential side benefit of global warming is if the ocean temperature does increase enough, will some of these temperature-sensitive corals extend further north. And we're already seeing it in plant communities here in Peninsular Florida. They haven't got enough of a long-term database of coral distribution. It has really been through this initiative that they're getting a lot of information now. Back when this CEF3 group started in 2003, that was one of the first things they identified is there's a big question mark about the science in all this. So they have set up a number of plots where they're doing detailed analysis, and hopefully through that we'll get to those kinds of answers. But if it's already been documented in plant communities here, it's no doubt going to happen in the ocean as well. You know, if lionfish can go from a single one that was released down in Dade County a few years ago to now tens of thousands of individuals, and they've moved all the way up the coast, I guess, to Massachusetts or something like that. And also other reef species probably will as well. Okay, it's 3:30. Hopefully Donna will come back and we've done a good job of keeping